As I sat down to write this week, I realized there were so many different things that I wanted to say about the ethical impacts of our food and our eating habits. As I explored the different possible directions, the thing that kept coming up over and over was how deeply our eating habits connect us to the world. If you've ever been to a multi-day gathering of Unitarian Universalists, especially beyond Tapestry, you know that they put a great deal of care into their diets. In a way, it's kind of funny. It's like those you jokes about screwing in light bulbs or burning question marks on the lawn. But at another level, it's inspiring. It's a reminder of how many people live out their faith with sincerity in our tradition, even in the most mundane activities of life. This concern about food isn't unique to us, though. It's something that faith traditions have done for thousands of years, as we've created rules and rituals about how we eat. They were related to the timing of agriculture and community health and disease prevention. But also, we humans have known for a very long time that being grateful for the gifts of the earth is essential to our well-being. So this morning, I'm going to share quite a bit about my own journey with food, and I hope it invites you to daydream a little bit. I hope it reminds you of your own experiences, either similar or completely opposite. So I have been mostly vegetarian most of the time. And yes, that is a very vague statement. It was an admittedly odd beginning. As a young kid, I had a very, very close friend who was a devout Episcopalian. So every springtime, his family gave up something for Lent. Out of my religious curiosity, I followed suit. One year giving up soda, and other years giving up other childhood indulgences. But in 7th grade, I stopped eating meat for Lent, and it stuck for a very long time. If I'm completely honest, at the time, part of the draw was the sort of countercultural factor that vegetarianism provided. Vegetarians in Oklahoma back then were still pretty out there. Preventing the suffering of animals was important too, and it just sort of stuck. It hasn't always been an absolutely straight trajectory since then. There has been some shifting over the years. These days I eat fish, and if it's a holiday with family or someone prepares a special meal, or even if I'm really hungry traveling and the options are limited, I'll eat turkey or chicken. Mostly, I just try to pay attention to what I'm eating. This week, reflecting has reminded me what a huge opportunity our diets are to find depth and connection in our lives. A huge portion of our relationships with other people happen over meals. Family dinners, of course, feeding small children, birthday celebration dinners, first dates. It's hard to say how often it happens, but there's that idealized picture of a wedding proposal over a romantic meal. I don't know if that's real or not. For me, one of the most interesting places where that sense of connection happened was in the Peace Corps. Without a regular job, Peace Corps volunteers tend to spend a whole lot of time alone during the day. So when dinner time comes up, it's nice to sit down and break bread with one of your neighbors. Even more than that, there was a recognition for me that people had worked really hard for the food that they were sharing. Often some portion of it had been grown in their own fields. And the labor involved in cooking was extraordinary. No one in the village had a kitchen, as you or I would call it. Food was prepared in pots cooked over wood or coal on the ground. And there were few, if any, pre-made ingredients. Food was the fruit of really hard work. And then there was the intimacy of eating. Like in many parts of the world where I was living, food was eaten out of a common dish, shared. Usually there were no utensils involved. You would wash your hands and dig in together. It's nearly impossible not to feel like you have bonded with someone after sharing a meal like that together. Today, as we're talking about food as a source of connection, it's worth also naming that it can be used as a tool for separation or condescension. The purpose of eating mindfully is not to feel better than other people. If you are an ultra-vegan or the king of keto, if you wouldn't dream of eating anything that hadn't been certified organic or blessed by a shaman, that is awesome. And I hope those practices are helpful for your life, but they are not a vantage point from which to judge others. If I'm completely honest, I did get a sense of pride out of my mostly vegetarian diet. But I learned some facts this week about my carbon footprint that gave a little better perspective to my high horse. On average, food accounts for 10 to 30% of a household's carbon footprint. That's not a lot. And by going vegetarian or vegan, you can cut your carbon footprint related to food by 50%. So speaking in vast generalizations, a vegetarian or vegan diet is going to cut your overall carbon footprint by 5 to 15%. The other thing I learned is that as you move along the spectrum from eating lots and lots of meat at one end to being a total vegan at the other end, there's a diminishing return for your efforts. That's to say, making the transition away from eating beef and lamb has a far bigger impact than making that one shift from being vegetarian to vegan. So, those of you still eating beef or lamb have a huge opportunity to make a difference by reducing that from your diet. I honestly thought that my being a vegetarian was making a bigger dent than it was. I guess my garden burger isn't going to save the world after all. My diet doesn't make me a superhero or earn me a perch from which to judge others, but it does make some difference. The most important difference it makes to me actually is less measurable than a carbon footprint. Being someone conscious of my diet gives me a sense of grounding or connection to the earth. It's difficult to put into words. Part of it is reducing environmental impact. 5 to 15% reduction in carbon footprint is worth it, probably to me. But another big part of it is reducing the unnecessary suffering of animals in factory farming. It's not animals dying that bothers me. It's the idea that millions of them are bred and live their lives in man-made cages and are filled with antibiotics and transported over obscene distances. It's not the fact that they die that bothers me so much. What bothers me is what we subject them to before they make it onto our plates. And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty about all of that. There are plenty of documentaries that you can check out to learn more about that. What's more important for this context is to say that my diet is an opportunity to recognize a sense of relationship with the earth and with other beings. It's really hippy-dippy. I know that. But so is this interdependent web of all existence. There's actually a very different version of a diet that connects with the earth that I want to mention because it was compelling when I learned about it. It will make some of you squirm. We might call it ethical hunting. Rather than hunting for sport or trophies, some hunters kill with the exclusive intent of putting food on the table. For a while, the only meat that my brother ate was deer that he had shot or fish that he had caught. And he lives on a significant piece of land. But because of the lack of predators in a huge portion of the United States, deer have become a nuisance population, actually harming the environment. Shooting a limited number actually helps the forest. In order to attract animals to his land, my brother carefully manages it, weeding out invasive plant species. And like most hunters, he has motion-active cameras all over the place, so he knows the wildlife that are coming and going. He gets a sense of his animal neighbors on a daily basis. Here in Orange County, living on deer from your land isn't much of an option. I do see a lot of people fishing, though, at the beach. It's difficult to imagine Tapestry members filling their deep freeze with their latest kill. Still, it's a helpful reminder that a lot of people connect their diets with the land in compelling ways. A very different sense of connection that comes through food is something that nearly everyone experiences, or at least I hope everyone experiences. It can connect us to tradition better than anything else I know. For me, that sense of tradition comes in a particular recipe of banana nut bread. It's the recipe my mom makes. I make it on occasion when I'm feeling nostalgic, but it's not my mom's recipe. It's actually my great-grandmother's recipe. Amanda Knuckles came to the United States as a German immigrant. She brought with her a love of baking and an expectation that everyone would sit down to breakfast and dinner with a tremendous appetite. And the smell of banana nut bread, this recipe in particular, reminds me immediately of family Christmas. I also wonder back generations about Mandy's life, what it must have been like to come from Germany to live in West Texas. Where did her recipes come from? With scoops and handfuls that she uses to describe ingredients, I'm fairly certain she didn't get it out of a book. And another sense of food tradition that I have shared is with a good friend. He's Jewish, and every Friday night, as many Jewish families, every Friday night for Shabbat, his mom would roast a chicken. They weren't an especially observant family. He's a committed atheist now. The only thing that he does for his heritage is to light a yahrzeit candle in memory of his parents' death. But from time to time on Friday night, he roasts a chicken. It's a simple and strong connection to a sense of history. And it's an absolutely incredibly juicy chicken with the perfect crispy skin. And yes, this is one of my variations from the mostly vegetarian diet. So the initial idea for this sermon was encouraging folks to eat more ethically, to consider the environmental and ethical impacts. We all know the old adage, you are what you eat. There's a lot of truth in that nutritional standpoint. We know that our bodies are impacted by and eventually literally made up by what we eat. But perhaps it's also true that we are how we eat. Eating out of habit and convenience. Eating without thinking for a moment about the world that your food comes from is a real missed opportunity. We know that the past few years have been rough. We keep waiting for next year to get better, right? In the U.S., we've dealt with a nightmarish political roller coaster that doesn't seem to stop spinning. COVID is rearing its ugly head in new ways. The realities of global warming are deeply frightening. In the midst of all that turmoil, one of the core challenges seems to be a sense of isolation and loneliness. It feels like we're in this tremendous challenge all alone sometimes. Mealtime can be very mundane. Like so much of our lives, you just sort of do it in a robotic fashion. But if we actively choose to use it as such, food can be a point of profound connection in the face of isolation. Food can be a source of connection when we choose to make it so. So in that vein, talking about action, I want to invite you to think of two concrete ways that you can be more mindful about your eating. You're not necessarily committing to them, just things that are achievable. I'm going to list a few of them that might inspire you, a few possibilities. Meatless Monday. Just as it sounds, skip meat on Mondays. Maybe eat meals with others when the opportunity arises. Prioritize sharing family dinner at home once a week. Not every night, just once a week. Dig out an old family recipe and make it sometime soon. Or swap a favorite recipe with, friends or siblings. I have to move. There we go. Yay for environmental consciousness and automatic lighting. Swap a recipe. How about pausing for a moment of gratitude, a moment of grace before meals? It doesn't have to be every meal, maybe just dinner. Invite someone that you're missing to share a meal, and you can even do that by Zoom if they're far away. Cook with someone. This is especially amazing with children. Visit a farmer's market or subscribe to a community-supported agriculture box. Stop eating beef, or in some other way, shift your diet one notch more towards sustainability. Just make a really nice picnic and go eat outside. And I don't know if it's too late in the summer, but you could try planting something that you can eat yourself. Are there two little things that you can do? Something that we do every day, 3 times a day or more, is an opportunity to find connection. If we pause for just a moment, we can step outside of habit to be in the present moment. Like a lot of opportunities for connection and spiritual deepening, it's mostly a matter of slowing down and making a conscious choice. It's not about being perfect. It's about making a choice with intention. Amen.